Well, Attorney General Jeff Sessions issued new guidelines today for protecting religious liberty. The government-wide directive could have an impact on policy decisions ranging from birth control to LGBT rights. The ACLU has already said it will sue. Justice reporter Paula Reid is in our Washington bureau to break it all down. Okay, Paula, tell us what's in this new guideline on birth control.
Well, specifically with birth control, the Trump administration is expanding religious exemptions to the birth control mandate under the Affordable Health Care Act. Of course, one of the key benefits under Obamacare was that Obamacare compliant insurers needed to cover certain types of birth control. There were some exceptions for religious employers, but what defined a religious employer, that became the subject of a lot of litigation. So today, the Trump administration has announced that any entity that believes it has a sincerely held religious belief or a moral conviction against covering contraceptions can be exempt from that birth control coverage requirement.
So when you're talking about impact, Paula, who exactly could be impacted by this?
It's just not clear at this point, because anyone who receives health insurance from an Obamacare compliant insurance plan should be receiving this, but there are no statistics about how many of those entities may have a moral conviction against this or a sincerely held religious belief. Those are new categories. Those are very broad definitions. Health and Human Services says 99.9% of American women in the U.S. will not be impacted. But earlier today, when we pressed them on how they got to that statistic, they really were not able to explain how they came up with that number.
And why is this coming now?
It's a great question. The administration says that at least 50 lawsuits have been filed over this particular issue, but today we're also already seeing new lawsuits being filed over this change in policy. And this is also something that the president did promise on the campaign trail that he would try to do to expand these exemptions, what religious groups can be exempt from this particular requirement of Obamacare.
And the Justice Department has also issued new guidelines on religious freedom. How do you think that'll impact the White House's new policy?
Well, it certainly helps when you're rolling out a new policy to be able to hold up a set of guidelines from the Justice Department and say, look, what we're trying to do completely squares with what the Justice Department tells us. But these new guidelines, this is not new law, this is not new policy. This is this session's Justice Department reading through all of the many religious protection laws on the books and sort of summarizing them. And their summary offers a very broad scope of protections for religious freedoms. But Rena, just over the past few days, we've seen that the same Justice Department has looked over laws, for example, for protecting workers based on sex discrimination, and they actually made a much more narrow interpretation of that particular law. They said, sex discrimination does not necessarily extend to transgender people. So this is what happens with every Justice Department. The law is not clear on every issue. They go in, they interpret the law, and they allocate priorities and resources to certain protections.
Yeah, we expect it to be so definitive and clear cut. It's a good point, Paula. But the critics to this guidance say that this could lead to more discrimination. What's the argument that they're trying to make on that?
That's right. So several of these civil rights organizations are saying that they worry that this is going to open the floodgates, allowing a broader exemption for the Obamacare mandate for people citing even a moral conviction against it. Now, that's going to open the floodgate to more types of what they describe as discrimination. They're worried that this could be broadened and embolden employers to discriminate. Specifically, they're worried about the LGBT community. And Rita, this is something, again, it's not completely clear. It's something that is being debated currently across the country at the state and federal level, as increasingly LGBT folks have been granted more state and federal rights. A lot of cases have been filed asking, well, how do those rights square with religious protections? And we're about to see a big case looking at that question when a baker who refused to bake a cake for a same-sex couple in Colorado, his case goes before the Supreme Court. He says forcing him to create that cake in violation of his religious freedom, that's a violation of his First Amendment right. So pretty soon we are going to get the Supreme Court to sort of weigh in on this big issue that's percolating across the country.
Yeah, a lot of people are curious about that one and how that'll end. Paula Reid, thank you very much for joining us.